Continued from the previous file, Literary Types, the novel, page 54. Narrative technique in the modern novels. The experimental novelists of the modern period evolved new methods of narration in the novel. Henry James, Conrad, Flaubert (French novelist), abandoned the direct or rather loose biographical method in favor of an indirect or oblique narrative with a great concern for the aesthetic considerations of pattern and composition, and a new conception of characterization built upon the study of the inner consciousness. Henry James evolves the technique of presenting his story through the consciousness of a single character, discarding the ubiquity and omniscience of the traditional novelist. He rejects both the first-person narrative technique and the third-person technique. He rejects the former because of the, quote, terrible fluidity of self-revelation, unquote, and the latter because of its, quote, lack of composition, its defiance of economy and architecture, unquote. To Henry James, the novel is a representational work, serving the same ends as the other arts. He therefore works out his own indirect and oblique view, which is also known as, quote, dramatized consciousness, unquote. It is a method of storytelling which tries to retain the vividness and immediacy, the warmth of self-revelation, while insisting on a vigilant editorship to control its terrible fluidity. It aims at concentration, economy, and intensity. It differs from the epistolary and first-person method by giving a third-person account of strictly selective impressions, from omniscient narrative by concentrating on the inner reactions to a given situation of a restricted number of characters. James pleads for unity or pictorial fusion of the elements in a story. He is disturbed by the want of it in so many novels of great popularity and of classic distinction, including the novels of Tolstoy and George Eliot, He says, quote, what do such large, loose, baggy monsters with their queer elements of the accidental and the arbitrary artistically mean? I delight in a deep breathing economy and an organic form, unquote. He has a horror of the loose ends, which he says has found a perfect paradise in English fiction. In the maintenance of a point of view, he seeks a steady consistency of effect, the intensity and concentration that come of an exact centering of attention upon the chosen plot of consciousness. In a Jamesian novel, there is a rigid and stringent pattern with economy of details, characters, and situations. The plot is developed through the consciousness of a character. The portrait of a lady, ambassador, and so there is no scope for discursiveness. It has few frills, few redundancies. It has rejected the irrelevancies of the Victorians, their dear reader, and moralizing. It is more like a, page 55, well-cut garden than an opulent tropical jungle, which it is thought the novel was in the hands of Dickens and Thackeray. For James, the novel is a, quote, personal, a direct impression of life, unquote. The narrator, who is a character in the novel, remains often outside the main drama of the novel, acts as a commentator and a guide to the presentation of the impression. He has perfected the technique of keeping away action from the novel and making it the instrument of impression. As a matter of fact, James's oblique method of presenting impression is the forerunner of the stream of consciousness technique in the novel. The novels of James and Flaubert are monistic. Life to them presents itself as a simple unit. Their novels exhibit little development of character, brook no digression. They gain in incisiveness but just in scope. They give a single portrait while Victorian novels give group portraits. Victorian novelists like Dickens, George Eliot and Thomas Hardy are inspired by liberal, expansive realism. In bracket, the student can provide the illustrations of David Copperfield, which adopts the first-person narrative technique, and Tom Jones, which adopts the third-person narrative technique. Bracket closed. Question 27. What makes novel great? Answer. Henry James is the exponent of the art of the novel. According to Henry James, the novels of Tolstoy and George Eliot are a stratification. They have a rich density of details. Henry James seeks a steady consistency of effect, the intensity and concentration that come of an exact centering of attention upon the chosen plot of consciousness. In The Ambassadors, he develops the action through the consciousness of the character of Strather. James secures a severe and stringent form of pictorial fusion, dialogue and consistency in the choice and maintenance of point of view. In a Jamesian novel, there is a rigid pattern with economy of details, characters and situations. There is no scope for discursiveness. The novels attain a dramatic pattern. But the novel is different from drama. It combines the narrative and the dramatic. The novel as a literary form has a greater scope than others for a mind of breadth and depth. It can represent human life in all its varied aspects. The novels of the 19th century, notably the novels of George Eliot, Tolstoy and Turgenev, are diffuse, discursive and expansive. There are too many characters and episodes. There are digressions in social criticism and philosophical discourses. According to Henry James, these novels are loose, baggy monsters. Page 56. Acceptance of Jamesian definition of the novel would reduce the novel to a rigid dramatic pattern. It would mean the exclusion of a great body of fictional writing, those of Tolstoy, Turgenev and Thomas Mann. The novel is the modern epic. It is characterized by expansive realism. It has the great advantage of revealing life in its manifold aspects. It is the most total, the most inclusive of all literary forms. Tolstoy and Thomas Mann, in their War and Peace and the Magic Mountain, show the stirrings of an entire social organism and the travail of a whole nation through the motions of individuals. Breadth, sweep and amplitude are essential to the making of a great novel. Without these, one may possibly achieve through the sheer concentrated intensity a great long short story like Conrad's Typhoon or James's The Ambassadors or Flaubert's Madame Bovary, but not a great novel. The novel achieves unity through diversity. A novel like George Eliot's Middlemarch or Dickens's Great Expectations achieves unity and coherence through gradation, repetition, image patterns, and through contrast and juxtaposition of characters and episodes. Through interlocking relationships, providing elaborate metaphor for the writer's moral vision. They provide a panoramic view of the society through the interplay of characters and situations, and the seemingly chaotic pattern is knit together by an internal rhythm. Question 28. What distinctive features of the novel make it different from a romance? Give illustrative references. Answer. Romance is a narrative characterized by exotic adventure rather than by the realistic depiction of character and scene usually associated with the novel. The Greek romances are complicated tales of idealized lovers separated by pirates, shipwrecks, and other catastrophes. In the Middle Ages, there were tales of love and chivalric adventure. These stories were taken from the history and legends. The Arthurian romances and Charlemagne romances stress the power of love and depict the series of adventures of the knights for the quest of Holy Grail. The Elizabethan romances like Lyly's Euphues, Euphues, and Sidney's Arcadia are set in remote ideal places and deal with love and friendship. Love betrayed and restored, or friendship broken by the quarrel about a woman and then re-established. In the 19th century, the term romance has been used to delineate works that are exotic or adventurous, such as the novels of Sir Walter Scott. Hawthorne called both The House of the Seven Gables and the Marble Fan romances. There are romance elements even in the works of Melville, Mark Twain, and Hemingway. There are symbolic elements, page 57, as in the fight of Santiago with the fish in The Old Man and the Sea. Romances provide pleasure in the remote and the unfamiliar. Romances appeal to us because they satisfy our dreams and inmost desires. The novel is the realistic presentation of life. All forms deal with life, but the novel is the most realistic of all arts. The novel rejects traditional plots and depends on the unique, novel experiences of the writer. Realism in the novel refers to the subject matter as well as to the technique. The novel seeks to record life with minute details, and it portrays life in all its aspects and variety. The novel deals with any subject matter, commonplace day-to-day life of the middle and lower classes. The American novelist William Dean Howells conceived of realism as a device for depicting simple everyday people with, quote, work-worn, brave, kindly faces, unquote. Russian realist depicts the social realism, while French realists focus attention on the passions and urges of the body and the heart. French realists depict sexual passions and give sordid details of greed and sexual desire with brutal frankness. D.H. Lawrence in Rainbow and Sons and Lovers analyzes the biological urges and sexual passions, but his treatment is guided by a philosophy of sex. Romance is rooted in men's yearning for the remote and the unfamiliar. Romantic literature gives an imaginative rendering of the familiar aspects of life, while the realistic tales and novels seek to present life as it is lived and experienced by men. Fidelity to experience is the core of the novel. In the novel, the near and the familiar is artistically rendered, but in the romance, the unfamiliar and the remote appear to the readers with the colors and glory of fantasy that always pleases the men and women. We are attracted to romances because they satisfy our yearnings and longings. They restore reality at a higher point by emancipating us from the prison of actuality. We have delight in our own commonplace, humdrum life reflected in the novel. We share the problems and flights of the characters in a novel because they belong to our class. But we have also the pleasure in what we dream and desire, but we cannot achieve. We are enchanted by the joyous song of the nightingale and yearn to fly with a princess in a remote, forlorn island. Thus, both realism and romance spring from our fundamental instincts. However, realism must be kept within the sphere of art by the presence of the ideal element. Romance must be saved from extravagance by the presence of poetic truth. Coleridge rightly points out in his statement of the page 58 twofold aim of the lyrical ballads. On the one hand, quote, to give the charm of the novelty to things of every day, unquote, by touching them with the, quote, modifying colors of imagination, unquote. On the other hand, to give substantial interest to supernatural incidents and agents, quote, by the dramatic truth of such emotions as would actually accompany such emotions, suffering them real, unquote. This is the crux of literary art. Whatever may be the subject matters, they must be given the semblance of reality. Creation of the illusion of reality is the aim of literature. The novel may be relentlessly realistic in the exposure of social problems or in the portrayal of human passions and urges, but it must move us and inspire us to a deeper and intenser perception of life. Question 29. What is the impact of Freud on the development of the modern novel? Answer. The novel is the most realistic of all arts. This is evident not only in the depiction of the everyday commonplace life of the middle and lower classes, but also in the portrayal of human passions and urges with brutal frankness. French novelists like Maupassant, Baudelaire and Flaubert show human life as guided by heredity and environment and analyze human passion with clinical details. The development of the novel has been always to greater introspectiveness, to deeper psychological realism. The novelists like Richardson, George Eliot, Thomas Hardy have made subtle psychological studies of characters. In the modern period, this psychological realism in the novels has been carried to the extreme by the psychoanalytical studies of Freud, Jung, Adler, etc. Literary naturalism in bracket of French novelists bracket closed has presented an image of man as a victim of environment and heredity. Freudian ideas substantiated these insights, offering a scientific terminology by which to interpret man's bondage to his sexual compulsions or to his repressions that society force upon him. Freud interprets man as a victim of his own compulsive libido and social repressions. This psychoanalytical interpretation encourage writers of both romantic and realistic persuasions to prove deep in the dramatization of the human situation. Jung's theory of collective unconscious strengthened the impact of Freudian psychology. The influence of Freudian interpretation is present in the works of D.H. Lawrence, Thomas Mann, Sherwood Anderson, James Joyce, and Virginia Woolf, drew enormously on the new knowledge of the psychology to reveal the hidden workings of the subconscious mind. Page 59. In Ulysses and the Waves. The stream of consciousness technique in the novel is, in fact, built on the new psychological interpretation of life initiated by Freud and Jung. Literary schools like Surrealism and Expressionism have been based on the idea of breaking through inhibitions and giving full expression to the irrational elements of consciousness and unconsciousness. These schools are indebted to Freud. D.H. Lawrence is most influenced by Freud in his insistence on sex as the motive of human behavior. He has kept to the traditional method of narration and has analyzed the sexual impulses that shape the behavior of men and women. The theme of sons and lovers is built on Freudian Oedipus complex. In Rainbow, he shows the sexual attraction between Ursula and other women. Homosexuality is the theme of many novels and poetry. In the poetry of Dylan Thomas, there is sometimes a collection of a number of sexual imagery, quote, thrown up as a drunk man throws up phrases, unquote. His surrealistic technique has derived from his study of Freud. Mother fixation and father fixation and even brother-sister relationship are shown in the light of Freudian psychology. The influence of Freudian psychology in the novel has led to certain excesses. There is a fundamental distinction between art and dream. Dream may be compulsive confession. Art is composed expression. The artist is in control of his product, while the dreamer is in a wild state. In the novels of James Joyce and Virginia Woolf, the psychological analysis is as desultory and incoherent as a dream. The traditional structure is abandoned, and the novel is a transcript of this illogical, incoherent process. As a result, the novels are obscure to the common readers. Next topic, the lyric. Question 30. Is the subjective element an essential component of lyric poetry? Answer. There are mainly two types of poetry: personal or subjective poetry, in which the poet goes down to himself and finds his inspiration and his subject in his own experiences, thoughts, and feelings. There is the impersonal or objective poetry, in which the poet goes out of himself, represents the feelings and passions of other characters, deals with what he discovers in the world without reference to his own individuality. Personal or subjective poetry is known as lyrical poetry. Lyric poetry, in the original meaning of the term, continued in the next file.